In this video, we're going to talk about how to make sure that your no-code app is the leader in your market. And this is going to apply to you whether you are still in your idea stage or even if you've already started building your app. And make sure you stick around until the end because we're also going to talk about a training that you can join that's going to help you get started with your app today. And if you've already started, it's going to make sure you are moving forward correctly. So today we're going to talk about how to make sure that your app is the leader in its market. Now, if you're new around here, my name is Kristen, and I'm the co-founder of Coaching No Code Apps, where we help business owners and industry experts build custom apps to either start their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses, all without coding and no technical background required. So how do you make sure that you are the market leader or the industry leader with your app? Well, we're going to jump over to my whiteboard here so that we can talk through this in depth. So when you are coming up with your app idea, rather you are identifying the problem that you're going to be solving, the solution that needs to be provided, and then when you're also fleshing that app out, when you are adding new feature sets or determining which feature sets you will be adding in the future, there are three main things that you need to keep in mind, and these three things should always be included in your planning process, in your strategy process. Okay, so number one, you have to look at your personal strengths. Okay, and what I mean by strengths are, what are you bringing to the table? Why are you the one building this app? Why are you the one providing the solution? Is it because of your knowledge, for example? You have really in-depth industry knowledge, and that's what you bring to the table. You have a ton of experience in this market, in this industry, with this type of business, whatever it may be. Maybe that is your big strength. Maybe you have lots of contacts in this area. You have existing contacts who you know are in need of this solution, and that's what you bring to the table, right? So we're thinking forward. What is it that you bring to the table that is going to enable your app to see success and to see a lot of success, to be the industry leader? So identify your strengths. Identify what it is that you are bringing to the table. And this applies, again, in a sort of an all-encompassing way when you're just looking at your app idea as a whole. But it also applies when we get more granular, when you're actually building out your app and you are planning which feature sets to add and kind of extending your roadmap as you go. This always applies. Your strengths, what you are bringing to the table, and why is it that you are the one who is building this app or these features or whatever it may be. So that's one thing you want to think about. The next thing you want to think about are the market gaps. So what is missing in your market or in your target market? What's missing, right? You need to make sure that what you're bringing to the table is actually filling a hole in your market. So let's look at your potential competitors, for example, apps that might be similar to yours that might already exist or that might come into existence down the road. What are the gaps that they are leaving? Now, gaps are just problems. Think of gaps as problems. So what are the problems that are being left unsolved? Now, you can build almost the exact same app as someone else. It can appeal to the same market, it can solve the same types of problems, but you might just do it in a different way. Or maybe it doesn't appeal to the same target market. Maybe it solves the exact same problem, but it just appeals to a different segment in that market. Okay, so you have to think about the market gaps. And again, this applies to your app idea as a whole, and it applies to when you are officially launching your app, when you are expanding it, when you are iterating it, adding new feature sets. Which market gaps are you targeting? Okay, so that's something that you want to think about. You want to make sure that you're not just building the same thing that someone else is building. Or if, if there is a really similar app, that you're not just copying it. If it is similar, you're filling a market gap with a different segment in that market, for example, something along those lines. So look at the gaps. And then the third thing that you need to think about are needs. Now, this is a little bit different than market gaps. What you need to make sure that you're doing is that you're solving a problem. So this is where we start to really step away from the gaps necessarily, because gaps can apply to segments of the market, they can apply to features, functionality, tons of different things. But then when we look to needs, you really want to start thinking about problems. Which problems are you solving? Are they problems in the first place? This is a route that too many people go down, and you need to make sure you avoid it from the very start. Are you solving a problem that needs to be solved? Okay, so key word is needs. And again, this applies to your app idea before you start building it. It applies after you have launched your app and you are continuing to grow and scale it. Are you consistently looking at your target market's needs? Are you consistently identifying problems that they need to be solved? So, when you look at these three components, you can start to evolve your app or your company into a market leader. And you want to start with this before you even start developing your app, because you want to make sure that you're moving forward correctly and you don't just end up having to backtrack once you do launch. But you want to keep moving forward and use these three factors to help form your strategy for the lifetime of your app. Now, let's get a little bit more detailed. So you can't just look at one of these things. And honestly, that is a trap that I see a lot of entrepreneurs falling into. They just look at one of these things. So they look at their strengths. What am I really good at? Well, you can be really great at something that not very many people need, right? You can also look at people's needs and think, okay, people need this, I'm going to provide it. But the strengths aren't there, right? The experience, the knowledge, none of it is there. So you can't just look at any one. You have to look at all of them, and you have to look at all of them together. Now, here's what you get when you combine these. So when you look at your strengths as well as your target market's needs, and when these two things align, when their needs align with your strengths, then what you have is simply a personal fit. And again, this is actually really important. It might sound simple or like it's not that big of a deal, it's not that important, but it is. You have to have a personal fit with this, because if there's nothing that you are bringing to the table, and again, if you're not focusing on your strengths, or you're not focusing on the needs together, there is a disconnect. And it's going to be hard for you to move forward and actually see success. You might be able to build your app, right, to make an app technically function, but you may very well be moving forward with something that nobody really uses on the other end, and you don't want that. So you have to look at these two things together and make sure that there is that personal fit there, that it actually makes sense to be building this app and for you to be building it, okay? Now, when you look at your strengths and the market gaps, this is another really important one. If you have identified market gaps, and your strengths play into those, well, what you're going to do is you're going to be able to create a better solution, right? It's pretty simple. You're going to be able to create a better solution. Again, You may have existing competition. And if you don't already, then there very well may be competition, and there very likely will be competition at some point. If your strengths play into market gaps that you're identifying, so number one, you're looking for those market gaps. But number two, your strengths combined with them, you're going to be able to create a better and better and better solution. And again, we're not just looking at the initial app here. Yes, that matters, but we're talking about throughout the lifetime of your app. As your app evolves, you will constantly be able to create a better and better and better solution. So it's really important that you look at these two things together. And when you look at needs, problems that need to be solved, and you look at the market gaps, and those two things align, then what you have is a lot of validation. And that's also really important. So again, you have to look at all of these three things together because each brings a different component or a different factor into play that will enable you to grow and improve within your market and come out as a market leader. Because what we're looking for is for you to fill this middle point right here, for you to take your strengths, take those market gaps, take those needs, combine all of them and become that market leader. So you can't just have one, you have to have all three of these. All right, I hope that was helpful. And if you haven't started with your app, we have a free 75-minute training. And it takes you step by step through the process that we use with our own clients and with ourselves to essentially just form a roadmap and strategy for your app. And so this is something that you can take and integrate into that roadmap and strategy directly and get started with your app today. And if you've already started with your app, go ahead and join in on this free training anyways, because it's going to make sure that you're moving forward correctly, because we don't want you to get to the other end where you now have your app and then find yourself having to backtrack because you haven't had the right initial strategy at play. So if you want to join in on that free training, you can head to coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop and sign up for it and get started right away. All right, again, I hope that was helpful. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.